Hi class, I'm getting ready to go through the 3X strategy, which covers exposition, example, and explanation. I like to pair my 3X strategy with a nice thesis statement. It's as good as cheese and wine or eggs and bacon, peanut butter and jelly, or cookies and milk. They're perfectly paired to work together with a good thesis statement. So what we want to do with this is to use these three X's as a way to support your paper, to keep it, to bring all of the content together, organize it, and provide the support for the points you want to make. So right now, if you're anything like me, when I've written these papers, you are probably feeling like there's a lot of chaos. You've got all this research, you have some ideas, you have personal experience stories that you feel like you could write about, but you're like, what do I do with all this stuff? This strategy should help you do that. All right, so the first bit that we need to look at is the exposition. So when we talk about exposition, we're talking about main points, thesis statements, topic sentences, those sections of the paper. It's where an expository sentence is one that gives previews of what you're about to tell us. They're explanation based or exposition based. So it provides the focus of the paper and of individual paragraphs. If you cut your paper down to nothing but exposition, it will look like an outline. And you can also think about exposition as telling. They're really helpful for organization. So if you look at this paper, your exposition will be your main topic and your sub-theme. So your identity that you've chosen, and then the sub-themes that you've identified as sort of main points to support your main topic. But from there, we want to start adding some meat to your outline, give it a little bit of flesh and blood. And that's what we want to do in order to give your audience, your readers, something to relate to. An outline is not going to do it for them. They need something emotional that they can sink their teeth into. So an example of that is your examples. This includes a lot of different things: personal experience, research, quotes, statistics, anecdotes. I say quotes from sources. You use these examples to support the statements made in your exposition. This is kind of like showing versus telling. You use examples to prove your point. So for example, your examples will include your stories, so like stories of your personal experiences, as well as quotes from your sources. So all of those play into being examples that help prove your point. And the next piece of this is we want to give your readers a sense of why they should care about your examples and understand how they support the points that you're trying to make. And that's where explanation comes in. This is our commentary and reflection. This is where you comment on and explain how the examples provided in the statements prove your exposition. So explanation helps your readers understand why they should care. You can think about this as the reflection portion of what we did in the first part of the semester. You can also think of it as that bottom piece of bread in your quote sandwich. It's the third X. Some words that you can use to help indicate explanation. In other words, let me explain. This matters because, I agree with this point because, to take this point further, this relates to my identity because, and this is important to me because. So an example, in this paper, use explanation to show relationships between the ideas and comment on how your examples relate to your identity. So here's an example of that. My story of students coming to my office in tears illustrates that I have communicated to them that I am a trustworthy individual, which makes me feel proud. That's a explanation of this example. They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. When students come to my office looking for an open door, they will find it. If I'm not providing that, I'm not living up to my values or my ideal sense of self. So explaining the quote is like that bottom piece of bread. So again, just to reiterate, the 3 X's: exposition, thesis and topic sentence, example, quotes, personal stories, anecdotes, statistics, and proof, and then explanation. This is actually a good indication of about how much it will take up in your paper. Exposition tends to be shorter and smaller. My alarm just went off. And explanation tends to be longer than exposition, but maybe not as quite as full as your example sections. What I thought was kind of fun is that my 7th grader was taught something really similar, claim, evidence, and reasoning. It's the same thing, but just a different acronym to help them remember. So if that's something you grew up with in the public school system, you can think of it that way if that's helpful to you. This is helpful to your paper, because you're not just focusing on saying that you're right. You give reasoning. That's usually indicated in your exposition. You give evidence in your examples to show that you're right, to prove yourself. And explanation helps to explain that chain of reasoning. I have a few examples to look at to help you see. What's life without examples? So let's look at my thesis statement. This was the one I've been sharing with you guys for a while. I say, teaching allows me to express the things I value most highly, care for my students' well-being and success, and care for the subject matter of English. We're going to focus on this red portion, care for my students' well-being. So here's an example paragraph where I have provided it color-coded. So Barb's beautiful modeling of care and teaching has influenced my career more than any book on pedagogy. Care is essential. The first sentence is actually a transition from my opening narrative attention grabber into my first point. So that's exposition. In an article titled Assuming Your Professional Teaching Identity, Dr. Jane Bluestein quotes noted author and educator Michelle Borba, who wrote, "Years later, what students remember is not the bulletin boards or even those hours you spent preparing those lessons. They remember your character." Similarly, Carl W. Buhner is quoted as saying, "They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel." Those are a couple of quotes that are operating as example there. These quotes resonate with me deeply because I remember the feeling of Barb's hug, the way she paid attention to what I had to say, her tolerance of my over-the-top quirkiness, and the genuine concern she had for me. This experience has deeply informed not only my teaching, but my way of living. I want to be a person like Miss Chamberlain who demonstrates care for people in a way that is impactful and lasting. So you can kind of see it's so helpful to color code it like that. Here's another thesis that I have some examples to show you about. This one is about writing. I say, I have come to understand that writing helps me to think more effectively, to challenge myself intellectually about my purpose in the world, and to create a good life that is of my own making. So we're going to focus on that first point about how writing helps me to think more effectively. So in this paragraph, it may be something like this. Writing is a way of thinking for me, and it's something I share with other writers according to theories of learning. As Carmen Werder explains in Writing is Inquiry, Writing is Thinking, writers discover what they think through the act of writing because making our ideas visible through writing enables us to see an emergent line of reasoning that we can then develop and refine. Then I go in and explain that quote, saying, the act of writing helps writers make sense of and bring order to the chaos of our minds. Notice the example, it tends to be a little bit bigger than normal. In this case, I'm using a quotation as my example. this is a little on the short side, and one of the nice things about color coding this is that you can kind of see, oh, I've done, I might want to balance out my paragraph with a little bit more explanation to help develop that. Here's another example that's a continuation of the same idea. So in my paper, I did not reiterate my same exposition because it goes straight from here, from this point, into this one. But it's implied that I'm still talking about the same thing. So my exposition, writing is a way of thinking for me and something I share with other writers. Got another example here in blue. For example, Louisa May Alcott describes Joan Marks as riding in a vortex, which is a kind of swirling tornado ever spinning back into itself. The image from the first edition of Little Women that so-and-so, this is a rough draft, created, shows Jo perched above her chair, hovering, so full of creative energy she can barely sit down. Her messy hair twirls around her face. Crumpled papers are strewn about the room, and yet her face is content and serene. So that's my description of that image that's operating as an example. And then I get into explaining that example and what it means. Writing engages paradoxes, the quiet chaos, the energized calm. I am silent and still, yet my mind is noisy and active. Again, you can kind of see that my explanation may need a little development when I get into the revision portion of the assignment series. And this example, again, as I said before, you can use imagery. Part of what you want to do if you use imagery is to give a description of the image in such a way that you're showing your reader what you want them to get at from looking at the image. If you look at a way it really shows up in a paper, it doesn't always look like right here in this paragraph, it looks very exposition, example, explanation, bang, bang, bang. But once you get over here, you may see things that sort of like blend together, or you may have some explanation leading into your exposition. It's not a science. This is a helpful strategy. You may have an entire paragraph of nothing but example, or a whole entire paragraph of nothing but explanation, and that's okay. Just be aware of what you're doing and why. You can look at a full paper with all the 3 X's identified. I'll put a link to that in the YouTube comments. And when you set this up, you may want your thesis to look something like this. To me, being an X means A, B, and C with a section A, each with exposition, example, and explanation, and the same with the other 2 sections. You can have one, or you can have a couple of A. You can do A, B. You can do A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, E. There's no rules about the number, but what we want is to have enough of each of these elements to be clear. And that's it. Happy 3Xing.